Hey guys, Stable here. Today we're going to be taking a look at Takeo Takagi and kind of putting together a long-range battleship build using his skills and perks here. Now, how I like to start off analyzing these commander builds, I play tiers 5 through 7, so I'm going to be looking at the Fuso, Nagato, and Amagi, kind of comparing that to the other tech tree ships at the tier. I don't have any German battleships unlocked currently, and even though you can look at the stats, they're not upgraded stats, they don't have mods on them, and they don't have the commander influence in them, so comparing those ships isn't necessarily profitable at this moment. So I'm going to be looking at USN and Royal Navy battleships in comparison. Now, in general, I think the IJN battleships are kind of designed to be played at long range. Common traits kind of vary ship to ship as the tier progresses. There's not a lot of commonality between them. Fuso and Nagato have the highest HP at the tier. Uh, Gun range highest on the Fuso. Reload time best on the Fuso. Traverse speed best on the Fuso, and best speed at the tier. Now compared to the Nagato and Amagi have the highest gun caliber at the tier, which helps with penetrating armor. They both have very good HE damage. AP damage highest on the Nagato, kind of middle of the pack on Amagi. And, in general, the gun traits are good, especially if you factor in number of guns. Like Fuso, for instance, has lower AP damage than the Queen Elizabeth, but it does have additional turrets. So the gun platforms on the Japanese battleships tend to be pretty good. Traverse is the worst on the Nagato and the Amagi. That's something that we could potentially mitigate through our build. Uh, Something to keep in mind. The one common thing throughout the entire line is the battleships have, or at least tiers 5 through 7, they have the worst detection at the tier. I am going to address that on my build. I know that's not going to be something that a lot of players are necessarily going to be thinking about, and maybe even after watching this video, you won't choose to go that route, but I do want you to think about it, so we'll be discussing the idea further. Mobility on all of them are decent. Amagi is the worst rudder shift at the tier, you know. But in general, they move around well enough for our purposes that I'm not really going to be focusing on the mobility. Fuso, again, worst turn radius. Nagato, kind of middle of the pack and all that sort of stuff. So those are the kind of considerations we're going to be going into the build with. Now, when you're setting up your commanders, the perks is what I call them over here. These are the ones that have the highest influence. You'll see I have a level 12 Takagi, so we have fairly strong influences here, but just take a look at the numbers. +8, +5, +8, +10, -5, -7, 9%, 12% over here. This one's not as big of a factor. Base traits, we're more numbers into like 3%. This guy is level 9, but we have a 3% there. I think he gets to about 5 or 6 once maxed. Cunningham, I'll max him this weekend. He's going to be about a 5% increase on the precision at level 16, not really factoring in the legendary status levels. But in general, these are the ones that are going to have the most influence on your ship. So I would, setting up your builds, find commanders that have the perks that you want to apply to your ships, and worry about the traits and inspirations kind of as secondary considerations. So for level 1 perks, good day's work, pretty good. We're reducing damage control party. Now managing damage control party, a key aspect of playing battleships at a high level and playing them correctly. So anytime you can reduce the damage control reload time, that's good. It'll help you cycle through those, put out fires, floods, etc. Well, not really, etc. Those are the two things damage con does. So this one isn't a bad choice, but I want to increase the range because I want to be playing this battleship at range for the majority of the game. So I'm increasing the range. I do have a trade-off on fires with this one. Now I don't know if the fire chance increased. I can't recall. Since this perk is maxed, you'll notice. But some negatives increase. Like this one goes from 7% to 10%. Sometimes they stay the same. 5%, 5%. You do want to take note of that when you're taking a look at these builds and factor that in. But in my mind, increasing the range is a plus. Increasing the precision, major plus. Again, long range, so we're going to want to work on that accuracy to be putting those shots through the targets where we want them to go. Difference between precision and dispersion, Um, Dispersion is basically an oval around your target, okay? So the bigger the dispersion, the bigger the universe of possibilities for where those shots can go. So the tighter the dispersion, the closer those shots are going to land compared to where you're aiming. Precision, on the other hand, tightens up the grouping of the shots. So if you have 10 guns with perfect precision, all 10 shots would land on the exact same point. Now, there's no perfect precision in the game, there's nothing anywhere near it, but that's just an example. So the precision tightens up the spread of the shots, you know, the clump up closer together. And if you're aiming properly, that's what you want. Dispersion, again, limits the range of how far those shells can travel from where you're aiming. So related topics, but they are different, so keep that in mind. But here we got precision increased, we have range increased. I'll take the risk of fire increasing. Again, at range, what we're trying to do, the downside of having a higher fire chance is it's going to force you to use that damage con more often. Now, for battleships, the main risk is flood damage. If you take torpedoes and they flood and you've used your damage con to put out a fire, multiple fires hopefully, if you're using it properly, then once you get that flood damage, you're unable to stop the flooding for the duration of that damage con cooldown. But because we're at range, we're going to be playing further away from the destroyers, hopefully, so that risk goes down. It's harder for enemies to start fires on us because we're going to be at range as well. So I'm going to take that trade-off. That one's up to you, though. These are both strong perks, in my opinion. Likewise, Tier 2 perks, pretty decent. Now, this one increases the speed of the traverse by 9%, up to 1.2% fully max once we get to Legendary Rank 2, which is obtainable. That's fine. If you want to go with that, that's fine. This one also has a trade-off, and you'll see the negative increases. The negative is a decrease to your speed. Battleships, that's not as big of a consideration for me. You're not going to be relying on your speed to dodge shots as much as you would be in a cruiser, where that would be more detrimental. But here we're increasing the damage of the AP shells. Now, you've heard me talk about traits and skills that increase AP damage not being as valuable as some may suspect it is. But for battleships, when you're going to be shooting AP 99% of the time, it's a worthy consideration. For instance, if I have it up to Legendary Rank 2, 10%, I get 100k damage in a game. That's 110. That's a fairly large increase. Whereas if we were dealing with a trait, say that increased by 3 or 4%, maybe that's not as big of a bonus. But 10% is actually quite large. So that, in my mind, is worth slowing down the battleship all day long. Again, if you don't want to do that and you want to maintain your mobility, then just play the traverse speed. But in my mind, I'm willing to take the detriments of these two perks by, I value the benefits more than I devalue the debuffs that it gives. Tier 3, this one's pretty, I mean, it's nice when you have it, but it's not that useful, especially on a battleship. Again, Japanese battleships, highest caliber guns at tiers 6 and 7, pretty good caliber, throughout. The guns are quite large, so ships like the Scharnhorst, the KGV, the King George, where you're going to be switching shots more actively, you could consider using a perk like this, but because I'm mainly shooting AP, I don't even look at this one, to be honest with you. And this one tightens up the dispersion. Again, long range gunnery of battleships, anything we can do to increase the accuracy is going to help the end results. Again, rudder shift time, not that big of a deal for playing properly at range. It's not the end of the world. Tier 4, this one's decent. It cuts down on the damage con reload time, which is nice. At level 16, you get a 12%. At Legendary 4, I think it would be a negative 15% reload time. Legendary 4 rank is thousands of dollars or years away, so I don't really consider that in my thinking. I'm kind of looking at 12% as the max. The 30% duration, that's not a negative. I mean, it is a little bit. What happens, if you don't understand how damage cons works, when you fire it up, the icon will turn green, And in the case of the Japanese, it's active for 10 seconds. That prevents you from getting new fires or floods for 10 seconds. So it is useful, but cutting that down by a few seconds isn't the end of the world. What you're mainly focused on here is the reload time. That'll, again, allow you to cycle through those damage cons, maintain your ship in optimal running order. So, good perk here. This one's debatable. I mean, I could go back and forth on it. Increasing the range, though, is good. I mean, we'll get a 3% range increase at level 16 once we buff him up. So that's how I'm currently running it. I could go back and forth on this one, though, and see value in both of them. Legendary rank, this one's a dud. Anything that reduces a repair party charge, in my opinion, is a non-starter. I think they should just scrap this one and redo it, because in my mind, this isn't an option. If I'm missing something, let me know in the comments. I don't know everything in the world, so there's certainly things that I might not consider. But in my mind, that's a non-starter. I mean, the repair party is a huge part of Battleship play, and reducing it by a third in this case would be quite detrimental. So I don't even look at that one. This one's fine. It increases the HP recovered, again, 6%. So once we get up to level 2 is what I'd really be looking at, these legendary ranks, level 2 for the foreseeable future. So that's fine. I'm not that concerned about either of these. This is a nice little boost, but it's not going to change my life. Legendary ranks, I mean, it does add a little bit to, like this one's maxed because I'm legendary 1. I think this one will be maxed once I'm legendary 2. And you get a little bit of a boost to the base trade. Base trade on Takagi, initially on paper, I thought it sounded pretty good. Total HP restored by repair party. Right now I have it at 3.25, which ends up being about 10 points of HP per second. And my damage con on the Amagi's 28 seconds. So it ends up being about 300 HP restored per repair party charge, assuming I'm fully repairing, damage. I don't use it early before my ship's not damaged enough to fully maximize the repair party. So all in all, you're looking at about 1,000, maybe 1,200 when it's maxed, whatever it is. Decent, but not game-changing. So I'm kind of devaluing this one as an inspiration on other commanders going forward. But not the end of the world. It's nice when you get a commander that has a strong base trade. But again, you want to be looking at the perks as your primary consideration for which commander to choose. And because this guy fits my playstyle more for IJN Battleships, I go with Takagi. Now this one is going to be a little bit controversial, I think. I started trying this out about, I think last night. I put on Kondo. I only have him at level 9. And I think I have plans to boost him up to probably 11, 12, however far. I'm not going to have any insignias left because I'm about to max Cunningham come Sunday. But I'll put him up as high as I can without using insignias, because this is valuable. People on my Discord were discussing the value of not getting shot right off the bat by using this inspiration, or maybe they were running Kondo, I can't remember. That's fine. I don't have a lot of problem getting shot right off the bat, but I know a lot of people do. So that's a good way to mitigate the possibility of that. What this 3% detectability is doing is reducing my detectability by 0.5 in the Amagi right now. And this, again, he's roughly halfway, so it's going to be about a full kilometer of detectability once he's at level 16. That's real. This is an inspiration that you can actually notice. It'll affect your game. And once those destroyers are removed from the game and you're playing battleships one-on-one, cruisers even, I mean, you can set up shots. Potentially, how you'd want to be doing this in an ideal world is kind of be right at the edge of your firing range. Start sailing away from them, fire your guns so you're detected. Then once you move out of the firing range, you go undetected. You can reposition, set up another shot, fire again, and you can keep doing this without getting any return fire. Now, it's hard to set these up in practice, but that's an idea to consider, and I will do a concealment battleship build video sooner or later once I kind of boost this guy up a little bit more. But just playing around with it for about a day and a half, it's a noticeable improvement to the ship versus this, you're not going to notice 300 damage every time you hit a repair party. Sure, it does something, but you're not going to notice it. This you do notice. And again, I understand most of you are going to say, what the heck is this? That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. That's fine. This is how I'm setting it up. I'm just trying to give you ideas to think about. We'll go over other possible inspirations here in a moment. The other one, I run Cunningham on all my battleships. And like I said, I'm about to have him maxed, I think, or up to level 16 at least. That'll put that increase of precision to about plus 5%, give or take. That's another thing you will notice. I mean, that's going to change the game. It's not going to make you a god in terms of aiming, but it will tighten up your accuracy for sure. So, Cunningham's strong inspiration, you know, like Norm Scott, I kind of use him on most of my builds, if not all of them. And in my mind, this is a very strong build for what we're trying to accomplish with these line of ships. So I hope you found this part. I try and go over and give you guys ideas. Whether or not you agree with the build or not, I don't really care. The whole point of the commander system is to customize it to fit your playstyle. This fits my playstyle for these ships. But we will go over some other possible inspirations here. The first one I have is Madden. I don't have him, obviously. I intend to use him on several lines of battleships and cruisers, or at least try him out. Maxed at 16, not including legendaries. You're looking at about a 4% increase of traverse speed and maybe a 3% reduction of reload time. Neither of them are earth-shattering, but for battleships that can have an influence for sure. Again, we did note that at least one of these ships that I'm considering does have poor traverse. And cutting down reload time of battleships, even if it's a minute reduction, still will benefit you. So I'd give a good look at Madden if you have him. Again, I'm fairly intrigued by him. Next up, I do have all three German commanders. First up, Celiax, increased AP shell damage. Again, I don't think that's a good characteristic to put on destroyers or cruisers, just because you're going to be shooting a lot of HE and those, so I like to just use the 100k game as an example. Here, if you max this, it looks like it's going to be about 5%. So 100k damage, you're going to get 5 extra 1,000 damage over the course of the game. I mean, that's not bad. You know, that's not bad for a trade. So definitely strong. I mean, if you compare it to the perk that was 10%, that's obviously much stronger. But like I said, perks influence your builds more than the inspirations and traits do. But if you combine those together, you have 15%, 15k extra damage. I mean, we're talking real world numbers here. So you could definitely give Celiax a strong look at these ships, especially IJN and USN battleships. I would consider using him. Von Hipper, I find more interesting. We'll talk about him more with Kondo. The secondary increase is good. The secondary is on the Nagato and Amagi. Good range, and the Amagi is a lot of them. So, I mean, the secondaries are good. I think, you know, excluding premiums that I don't know about, I think the Amagi secondaries at Tier 7 are only going to be second to the Bismarcks, you know, and obviously the Tirpitz. But like I just said, we're not talking about premiums. So, not a bad option. And just because we're planning on playing this build at long range, you have to be able to react at the course of the game. You can't just say I'm only going to play long range, or you're going to take yourself out of the game in certain situations. So secondaries do come into play, especially helpful if you get a destroyer that rushes you. So you could definitely give Von a Hipper a look. Sheer, another one. I mean, I don't think a lot of people might consider him. You do get a decrease in the fire chance, and you do reduce the damage con cycle through the reload time. Both of those helpful. Now, you're looking at these numbers, it doesn't look like they're going to be earth-shattering reductions. And again, on my build, I think it was perk 1 that boosted the fire chance dramatically. So this could potentially reduce that, or if you use the other perk that I didn't choose on my build, this could actually cut into the fire chance, the base fire chance of the ship. So decent, but again, this is not one of those traits that's going to really be noticeable at the end of the day. It's just going to kind of minorly influence the course of your game, which is fine. I mean, that's what a lot of the traits do, so something to consider. Now, Fraser, I kind of have as a placeholder. I suspect that the French battleships might have a commander that will actually increase battleship speed, which will have a more impactful uh, change per level than anytime a ship or a trait says it impacts battleships, cruisers, destroyers. That commander's per level increase or decrease of whatever is more impactful than someone that just says ship. Fraser says ship, so you can apply it to all three classes. But again, sooner or later, whether it's Russians or French, we're going to have a battleship commander that increases battleship speed. Interesting. I mean, on my build, like I noted earlier, I'm not that gung ho about speed, but if you are, this is certainly an option, so I did want to include him. Willis Lee, I prefer him less than Shear for a couple of reasons. Number one, his decrease on the damage control cycle reload time is less per level than Shear, so that is the more important of the two for me, and because it's worse, I find him less valuable. And flooding, normally if you get flooded and you are managing your damage con properly, you'll know when the torps are done hitting you, you'll hit the damage con and then the flood will end. If you're not able to damage con a flood anyways, cutting down the duration will help you, but you're already probably pretty boned anyways, so consider Lee for sure. I mean, try him out, but in my mind, he's not as useful as Shear, and Shear's not as useful as some of the other ones, so I put him on here as a consideration, but he's not going to be something that I put on my build anytime soon. Finally, we got our old friend here, George Dewey. Increase the torpedo visibility range. I get some feedback from some players on my Discord from time to time saying they like to use Dewey, especially a high-level Dewey on their battleships. Obviously, detecting the torps earlier makes them easier to dodge. My build, we're focused more on long-range play. I'm trying to not get torped anyways, and increasing the Kageros, I think the detectability is like a kilometer and 0.7 or whatever it is. Increasing it by, 10%. I mean, you're getting up to, a couple 100 meters or whatever it is. Useful for sure. I mean, try them out. Maybe I undervalued Dewey. Let me know in the comments if you think I do. But, I put him on here as a consideration. He's not on my build, though, so keep that in mind. So anyway, that's my look at Takagi here. I hope I gave you guys some things to think about. That's primarily the idea with these commander builds. I like to go over them and give my thoughts on the different options. Hopefully that sparks some ideas in your mind. If I'm missing something or you think you got a better idea than I do, let me know in the comments below. That's the other thing I want to have happen on these builds. I want to hear what you guys are running. I certainly haven't tried everything out, and I certainly haven't thought of every angle possible, so getting feedback from you is interesting for me, and it's no doubt interesting and helpful for other players as well. So let me know what you think. If you did like the video, please hit the thumbs up. New to the channel, consider subscribing. There's a lot of World of Warships coming all the time. Questions for me, comments, leave them below. Love to hear from you guys, and we'll see y'all later. Alright, peace.